Hi, hi everyone. Okay, so if at some point any Georgian comes across this tour recording on YouTube, I by no means do I want them to think that I'm looking for Romanov legacy and any sorts of geopolitical reasons for Georgia to still be part of Russia or anything like that. I know this is it's a very contentious issue. It's a very difficult topic. It's really, really very sensitive point and draw nerve of many Georgians. I'm not here to. I do not see Georgia as part of Russia or anything. No, absolutely not. And I acknowledge history, however. But here I am to explore the connections between the two cultures and also the legacy. And we have an amazing, great deal of gorgeous buildings that just happen to have been constructed in the imperial times. And well, it's just there, and it you cannot just neglect it. You cannot turn your blind eye to the fact that yes, there is something in common between the two countries. Yes, it is like this. And Romanovs have always been a very big topic for me. Well, I'm just doing the tours on the Romanov legacy in the Holy Land, and and now it's what used to be part of the Russian Empire. And the building that we're going to visit today has everything to do with both the imperial times, then the 3 years of the First Democratic Republic of Georgia, First Georgian Constitution, and also the invasion of the Bolsheviks, and in 1921, and also the Soviet period. And even the independent period, the modern periods of the Georgia is sovereign, independent country. So all that, this building has everything to do with all that. So more than 200 years of history, we are going to study within this short series of talks. I do not want to turn it into saga, nothing like that, but also I have this opportunity to talk about things that I normally do not have time to dwell on during my live walks in Tbilisi. So we're going to, I would say, study in detail some of the things, just some of the topics which I believe are interesting. So I don't want to overlook them. Whenever I can, I'll definitely get down to more details on that. Good. So I think we are clear here. I'm switching off the chat and give me a second to set things up. Yeah. Okay. So this is the Liberty Square, right? Or Freedom Square in the heart of Tbilisi. We have walked the street multiple times, and I wish I could take you on a live walk, on a live stream tour in the palace where I'm taking you tonight, but it's not possible because of the operating hours. Plus, it's not so easy to arrange, to agree on live streaming from state institutions, and it is a state institution in a way. So we are doing it in this format. For those who haven't done many tours of Tbilisi with me, I promise I'm back on the road. I'm back on live streams and live walks very soon. But just as a reminder, this is the 19th century area of Tbilisi, and we're going to walk a little bit on this 19th century street that became the central avenue. It's like the Fifth Avenue of Tbilisi, Rustaveli Avenue, that is called. But the old city of Tbilisi, the ancient city that is at least officially 15 centuries old, but it goes way back in time, is to the left. So you see to the left from the stela with the St. George obelisk, right? With the St. George monument on the top of the obelisk. If you go left, there is a road. So there used to be gates to the old city. And then if you enter the gates, you'll find yourself in the old city of Tbilisi. But we're not going there. And it's simply because starting from why? Why we're not going to the old city? Why do we have to stay on Rustaveli Avenue? That's because the early 1800s, actually 1801, Georgia became part of the Russian Empire. It was annexed. It was it wasn't taken by the storm, but it was forced to become part of the Russian Empire. We are not going to talk into details about how it happened, but it didn't happen just within one day or overnight. Shortly before that, Georgia indeed reached out to Catherine the Great in the 18th century to help Georgia fight the onslaughts of the Ottomans and Persians that had been given Georgia a really hard time throughout the centuries because Georgia, as you know, changed. Georgia has changed hands about I would say 15 times altogether. Well, okay, 15 major battles, major wars, and yeah, that wasn't easy. That wasn't easy for sure. But after the treaty was signed, not much really help came, and in the very last battle in 1795, Tbilisi was almost razed to the ground, and not much even of the old city survived. And then in 1801, Russian army invaded Georgia. It just entered Tbilisi and took it over. Not really by blood. No, there wasn't really a bloodshed. It was just kind of a setup. But we will get to that at some point for sure. But we can just say that Tbilisi and Georgian aristocracy were not really given any other option. They were stuck between the rock and the hard place, and they chose a kind of a more peaceful and the easier way to do these things. And that's how it happened. And then the Russian Empire, little by little, gradually helped rebuild the city and develop the city. Tbilisi became the capital later on, the big capital, the financial capital in the big center of the Caucasian district, Transcaucasia later on it will be called in the 19th century. And this is when cities started developing at a frantic pace. And the Tbilisi we see today with its historic buildings, it is the result of all those changes and all those cultural exchange between these two countries within one and the same empire. Yeah. So and the arrival of the Romanovs, well, it's not connected to the old city. It's connected exactly to the Rustaveli Avenue and to this area that would be developed already after the early 1800s. By the way, the same square originally looked like this. And all that area before 1800, it was just some small wooden buildings and just the road and the wilderness. So it all started, the Tbilisi started to outgrow itself, started to grow out of the walls in early 1800s. And originally in that area used to be standing this caravanserai, which is a hotel and also stables for the horses and also storage for the merchants. So it's kind of a motel, a hotel for merchants. So that used to be there. And also there was a theater. But further on, after some changes and the big fire, there was built a city hall. And this is the city hall. The same city hall is still standing here. And it became sort of the new center, the starting point for the big avenue, for the long avenue. This is the photograph taken in the city hall building. I have never been inside. It's still used as a state institution, and the access there is not possible. But I really wish I could visit. And this is what we can see if we were standing in the middle of the square with our backs to where the city hall is. And this is exactly the beginning of the Rustaveli Avenue. There's no way you can recognize the avenue from this 19th century postcard. Yeah, and one of the names of the streets actually was the Palace Street. Later on, it would be renamed into Golovin Avenue, named after one of the viceroys, Romanovs, by the way, viceroys of the Russian Empire. But well, we will get to that. This is the photograph taken at a slightly later period, but you have the idea. It still doesn't look like it's a major street, right? Um, well, but it was. It was. And it would only get wider and bigger, and many changes would take place for sure. But the amazing thing is that the mountain is still the same. This is the same Tasmin, mountain that is now overlooking Tbilisi. And this mountain has seen it all. And also, this mountain saw different stages of the development of the avenue, as well as the palace that we are going to explore today. I'm sharing with you some old photographs to get the idea of what the street looks like. This is, by the way, a stereo photograph. Well, here it looks already much wider, right? It looks way bigger. So this, that's simply because, well, it's just that it is naturally developed. Also, so the palace is exactly there in the left corner. So this is the palace, and you can see that from behind the palace, there is another building, kind of a dome structure stands out. This is, yeah, this is it. It's well, there's still no right? There's still no road, no traffic lights, no other public transport, but carriages and the horse-driven carriages that we call konka. You won't find this church anymore because the church was uh, knocked down during the Soviet times to build the parliament building on this place. But the palace is still here and the garden is still here. And I hope it will remain. This is also colorized photograph. The church is no longer here. This one that you see in the very front. I love looking at old photographs. I also like looking at how the way people were dressed and how one and the same street started to change. And here you already see the trams, right? So there is already the rails for the trams, and you see the paving. So clearly, this is already a much later period. This is second half of even the, I would say, almost okay, the turn of the 20th century. Paving started from 1850s and 1860s, and I'm just not entirely sure how long it took them to pave the entire avenue. It must have taken them quite a while. And just in case, so this is the church. Um, Russian Orthodox Church, by the way, where they used to call it military church, simply because it was the home church to Russian Harrison that was based there. That's why they would call it the Russian church or a military church. But to me, the two words cannot really stand together when you talk about religious institutions. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. And this is another postcard. So this is a celebration, a march, next to the palace itself. Vorontsov Dashkov was one of the viceroys Romanovs, by the way, in the 19th century. We are going to talk about some of the viceroys 100%. So the area next to the palace, the palace itself, the garden, it always served multiple occasions, official meetings, diplomatic visits, and also cultural events. And Vorontsov Dashkov, as well as several other viceroys, indeed brought, um, well, a lot of cultural development into the country. That's for sure. And intercultural connections. I'm not talking about just connections between the Russian Empire and Georgia. I'm talking about the world. But let's go on. So this, by the way, if you remember, just from across the street from the Vorontsov Palace, there is a church. Well, the area used to look a lot different though. And by the way, Rustaveli Avenue is now closing for a big restoration and I would say even revamping. So we'll see what it's going to look like. They promised to finish by next year. Well, by the end of the year, maybe even earlier. So we'll see. So the very first, we can say representatives at that point, not really a viceroy, but the representative of the empire in Tbilisi, in Tiflis. Sorry, Tiflis is the name of the city back then. Was Karl Knorring, and Karl Knorring did a lot to help rebuild the city. The city was just the heaps of the smoking ashes and debris of the houses. Um, that was a really horrible onslaught by the Persians, and many people just perished in that war. And the city itself lost so many precious historic buildings. But obviously, back in the days, they were not considered, I would say, that special. Then when Knorring came, there was built a very small one-floor house for Knorring. And Knorring didn't want to stay within the old city. He wanted to stay outside of the walls for multiple reasons, and mainly sanitary situation, right? And also the smells and the overpopulation. So he stayed outside, and then came the next viceroy, Alexei Yermolov. Alexei Yermolov, by the way, was the hero of the war against Napoleon in 1812. So later on, he came to Tiflis, and he could no longer stay in just a shabby, honestly, like a makeshift house for the viceroy. And the building was rebuilt. It became a little bigger, nothing like you see today, because these changes would take place only in the middle of the 19th century. And the changes took place during the presence of Mikhail Vorontsov, who was Governor General. He was the viceroy of the Russian Empire in the Caucasus, not just the Tiflis, by the way. So, yeah, it's all related to the Russian expansion in the Caucasus. Yes, this is true. This is true. Well, Vorontsov, not only did Vorontsov commission to rebuild, extend the existing viceroy residence. He contributed a lot to creation of several big squares in the city. He was very good at the city planning at the urban planning, and also he contributed to the construction of the theater and many other things, many other things. Um, and well, uh, he was the only viceroy Romanov to whom the Georgians, the Tbilisians, decided to put a monument after he passed away. So it was not the state initiative; it was the initiative of the people of Tiflis. Whether it was done just to please the Romanovs or it was done genuinely pay tribute to Vorontsov, I don't know. So originally, well, not originally, but after some of the reconstructions, that's what the house looked like. Still pretty big and impressive. Then there would be some changes made. It would be extended also. So this is the very first reconstruction done in 1847 to commission of Mikhail Vorontsov. And later on, Vorontsov wanted more changes to be made, and eventually he hired a German architect, Otto Simonsen. As you know, there used to live a lot. Well, there used to live a lot of Germans in Tiflis. There was even a German colony, several colonies across Georgia, and eventually in 1865, 1869 would be built this palace, and that's the palace we are going to explore tonight. We won't have enough time to see everything in just one tour. I think we will require maybe two more tours to talk about also other related topics. This is the only photograph of Otto Simonsen that I have been able to find. Otto Simonsen built a lot of significant buildings, really important buildings, and he was very good at it. All the buildings that he constructed became the symbols, kind of the brand of the city. So that's the palace. It still looks very much the same. The photograph is taken from the another side, from the opposite side of the Rustaveli Avenue. This is the decoration. So you see there is a decoration next to the palace. That's because the city was prepping up for the arrival of Nicholas II. And that's what the house looks nowadays. It is a palace. It has been recently renovated, and many rooms have been recently restored. Starting from the Soviet period. Oh, we don't need really the volume. It's pretty loud because it's the busy avenue. During the Soviet period, there was, so this place reopened as the Children's Activity Center. Yeah, I told you in the beginning that this place was in the eye of the storm and witnessed all those groundbreaking events in the country's history. But in the Soviet times, in the post-war times, so to speak, the palace became kind of the youth palace, pioneers palace, a place of children's, sort of children's activity, like hobby club, concert hall, and stuff like that. So I would say it was definitely the building was definitely demoted, but but there was and again is a big section that is open to public and it functions as a museum to all those things above mentioned. But the hobby clubs are still on. Kids keep going there, attending multiple classes, languages, school subjects, dancing, Georgian dancing, hiking clubs, and so on and so forth. So the place is huge. There is really a lot going on. And up until September or early October last year, the museum section was closed for restoration. So it reopened a few months ago, and Misha and I were among the first visitors to film it for you. And we were the only one on the tour. And I filmed it, and I can't wait to take you there. The place has some really, really impressive rooms and impressive history. So we will talk about it. The neoclassical facade, that was the choice of Vorontsov for sure, because this reconstruction coincided with his administration. Otto Simonsen still, however, well, Otto Simonsen was a German architect and he enjoyed neoclassicism a lot. However, I can also see the features of other styles and the facade, the design of the facade, and the design of the rooms. They are, I would say, quite, on the one hand, they are quite typical, especially from the interiors. It's quite typical for the imperial architecture. in the 19th century, but also they have features of local Georgian architecture. From the outside, it looks like any other building in St. Petersburg. So we're going up, marble staircase, of course, and we're going to find ourselves in the big staircase, in the big space. Sometimes they refer to it as marble staircase and marble hall. That door is also the exit, so we are definitely going to be back there. But as we look around, you'll see what I'm talking about. You will see. There you go. So here, since it's the hobby club, a children's activity center, there are tons of different exhibitions carried out um, on a regular basis. Well, they rotate, obviously. And for example, here are the works by the teachers, so the instructors who run these hobby clubs, and the works they have created together, the sculptures. And I find it absolutely gorgeous. I don't know these artists, obviously. Well, I know some of them, and you will recognize at least one for sure if you watch my previous tours. But it's nice to see. Well, in the ground floor, for example, there was an exhibition of like really little children paintings. There were also exhibitions by local artists. And it's great to see them all together in such a beautiful location. The next sculpture we're going to see was made by Gia Paridze, and he's a sculptor and the artist and the designer. And his his sculptures are unique and very recognizable. And we have seen some of them on my tours, on my live walking tours. Well, this is one of the sculptures right over the Kura River. And these two, you can find his sculptures all across the country. Well, Georgians love them. This is well, I like this one because this is a kind of a loving couple. This is the typical characters, of Tbilisi, late 19th century, loving couple in old Tbilisi by Olga Vachadze. They look very good. Well, I mean, they all these sculptures were made by professionals, but still, this is just kind of a like children's hobby club. But also, the palace is it it is participating in a project where museums exchange they exchange parts of their collections for display. And these are the copies of the costumes that you could find in Georgia in the 19th century in various regions. But they are copies, of course, because their originals are in a pretty bad condition, and they are not going to be exhibit it again unless they get restored, which I don't think so. But here you can see the garments that belong to people, well, that would be worn by people of different status, men and women, slightly more expensive, slightly more modest type of the outfit. And I think this is my favorite, just the choha, well, this type of men's garment. It looks like a coat. And this one, honestly, I don't understand how waist can be this narrow. I just don't understand how these women what they ate. Because if you even if you eat just one big Georgian dumpling, a hinkali, you just your waistline is going to just explode. I mean the dress explode. I don't know. But well, I just find it very elegant and beautiful. And it's kind of a small marble staircase over there. Now, let's look at some more artworks done by the students who attend the classes here. Welcome to the Mirror Hall. Well, this. rooms. This type of rooms you will not find in St. Petersburg. This is kind of a luxury Georgian style and on the Georgian scale. And why it's called Mirror Hall, I think it's pretty clear why. So the room is decorated with squillions of mirrors and the plasterwork, ornate plasterwork, and also stained glass. Um, and this is a very typical Persian influence in general. And well, just the Moorish style in the decoration in general. And this hall was used by the Romanovs for parties because one of the responsibilities of the Viceroy of the Russian Empire was to mingle, to establish contacts, to get to establish support and rapport between different social classes. And a very clever thing, which I have spoken about on some tours, but it's not going to be a problem to repeat it. The one thing Romanovs did very um, correctly. Well, they did it really right. They gave Georgian aristocracy the same rights as Russian aristocracy, the same recognition, the same rights, and that helped them a lot. So here, Viceroy Romanovs, especially Vorontsov, Dashkov, and Mikhail Vorontsov as well, whose portrait we have already seen. Well, they threw some of the best parties in town in this very hall. But as I said, also this palace was well witness right to a lot of turmoil of the 20th century, and mainly so when the viewers cannot access the tour. I'm just going to send Dorley the direct link if it helps. Yeah. So, well, it's been recorded, so I'll share the recording as soon as I can. And well, so you see that the room has been, well, it's just really, really freshly done. I mean, it shows, it's beautiful, but it doesn't feel like something old. And there is a reason for it. So one of the things that we're going to talk about everything that this house witnessed over the course of 200 years, but let's talk about the 1920s, mainly 1921, 25th of February. This palace was stormed by the Bolsheviks when they invaded the city in the attempt to take over Georgia and put an end, well, to its independence, which they did. And when they came, they robbed it. They robbed this palace from almost everything they could. And what they could not take with them. They didn't just leave on its place. They simply took everything and placed it in the garden and burned it. So the house was robbed, stripped of everything, and left like this. So unfortunately, much of what we see today in terms of the interior decoration is a reproduction, is a recreation, because almost everything was lost. Some bits of glass survived, but it's nothing compared to, like, I mean, look at all these details, look at all these ornaments. It took years and years and years of work to restore it, and luckily there is a glass and stained glass workshop in the Academy of Fine Arts, which we are going to visit too. I suppose right after we are done with the Viceroy Palace, we're going to explore the Fine Arts Academy in Tbilisi. I shared some reels from there on my birthday. Yeah, it's an impressive location for sure. So unfortunately, in this room, the only original item you see is the chandelier, the one that is not turned on. So the chandelier is original. In a couple of other rooms, the chandeliers would be original, and it's just for you to know to see the dimensions. And now we are entering another room, and this is a very important room, by the way. It's called White Hall just because of the abundance of white color in general. Well, this hall will explain to us why it was so important for the Bolsheviks, for the Red Army to invade the palace and rob it completely. Well, not desecrate, but humiliate everything. That's simply because in this very house, well, we already know that this was the palace where all the political decisions with regards to imperial Georgia, right, and connection with St. Petersburg were, well, this is where all of this was discussed. This was the center of it, absolutely. And after the revolution, the palace became the hub of the political life of the independent Georgia. And this is where the Declaration of Independence of Georgia was signed, exactly in this very building. And well, you see the reflection of the chandelier. So this chandelier saw it all. They saw, well, this chandelier saw the Declaration of Independence signed by, by everyone. They saw this chandelier saw the creation of, the drafting of the and creation of the Constitution of Georgia in 1921. So a lot of things happened over the course of the 3 years since 1918. 26th of May 1918, Georgia officially declared independence and the creation of the First Republic. 3 years later, this is, by the way, this is the photograph of of the Declaration of the Independence, um, um, and this is the entire document. So 26th of May 1918, this is when the history of the independent kind of the new Georgia started. And more than a century later, this date still resonates with many Georgians. I don't know if you noticed that on my tours, but when I walk down the city, especially during the summer, I see a lot of Georgians wearing t-shirts with the figures, with the date, like May 26th, sometimes without a year, sometimes with a year. It's like they know, they remember. And that date for them is fundamental, absolute pivotal, well, changing point for Georgians. So this was the place where national pride finally was brought about, right? So that's why, obviously, for Bolsheviks invading and robbing this palace was was a big deal, right? So it's not just the Declaration of Independence. They're also, exactly in this building, it was decided what would be the flag of the Democratic Republic of Georgia, what the coat of arms of the Republic of Georgia would be. They chose the national anthem too. So they were basically building a new state, almost from scratch, almost. It took them a while for the Constituent Assembly to be put together and to draft the Constitution. But that project was definitely worth it because the many politicians, many diplomats that took part in ratification, that took part in the recognition of independent states of Georgia in the League of Nations and other international platforms, they indeed noted how advanced and how progressive the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of Georgia was. Yeah, some of the key figures which I spoke about on my tours on the Russian Exodus, which was a long series of tours of different nationalities of the Russian Empire who fled Bolsheviks, and there were several tours about Georgian aristocracy, and well, because eventually, 3 years later, in February 1921, when Bolsheviks invaded, the the government of the Democratic Republic of Georgia had to flee, and they would call themselves the well Democratic of Georgia in exile. And this is Noor Jordania, who was the second and the third governor, head of the Republic of Georgia, and he was the head of the parliament, the head of the government in exile. He was the key figure on the international scene in Paris with regards to Georgian independence. So all these key documents were signed here in this palace. And after the signing of the Declaration of the Independence, exactly to this room and under this chandelier, it was announced to wider audiences. So that's a big deal, absolutely, and it's not all even. So we definitely have time to see one more room. And I'm so sorry that I had to schedule this tour immediately after the previous one. But in 15 minutes from now, Leonie is going to do a tour, and it's going to be about some Neolithic site. I'm not sure. I never want to overlap with my colleagues, and whenever I can skip that, and I cannot overlap. I always do. So that's why. And if you're going to join Leonie, just send my love to her. Now, welcome to this big hall. Sometimes it's called the Golden Hall because of the columns. They seem golden, but actually they're not. I mean, they're um the pilasters, right? So pilaster is like a half a column. This stage, that's Misha, it is not original. It was not here back in the days. The stage was placed in the late Soviet period when it became the hobby club for kids. Sorry. But in the imperial times and in the independent times, this was a very important hall. So as it says here, in this hall on February 21, 1921, the Constituent Assembly of Georgia adopted the first constitution of Georgia. So in Constituent Assembly, 50% of the Constituent Assembly were made up from the members of National Council. And all these gatherings, all these council meetings, negotiations, diplomatic visits from of different, European countries, it was all held in this room. So you just imagine, right, the importance of this room for Georgians. So at the end, the very sad thing is that the Constituent Assembly would be disbanded the same year, 1921. So 26th of March 1918, Georgia declares independence. In 1919, Constituent Assembly was formed, and they started working on their project of the Constitution. Eventually, on the 21st of February, the Constitution of Georgia, the first ever Constitution of Georgia, would be signed. And 4 days later, just imagine this, 4 days later, on the 25th of February, 1921, the Bolsheviks invaded Tbilisi, invaded the palace, looted it, and took over Georgia. That was it. This is the photograph of the Soviet troops invading Tbilisi. This is one of the headlines on the newspaper. Soviet set up in Tiflis. Capital may be used as base for invasion of Persia. Well, there was no invasion of Persia. There was no, we're also talking about the times of the post First World War. And that's the reason why, by the way, well, after 1970 revolution in Russia, the civil war broke out. And that was the only reason for the Bolsheviks not to invade Georgia immediately, because the country was pretty much busy fighting its own people that didn't want to leave under the Bolsheviks. So when things died down and the civil war would be coming to an end, it was this, well, they got down to Georgia and they just waited and waited. There were several attempts to do that, but they just kept waiting and waiting. And then the time came. Let's put it like this. So this is the Rustaveli Avenue. Um, 4 days of constitution. I don't know if this is the world's shortest lived mm, constitution. Maybe yes. I haven't looked it up, but it's just the very big bummer. Very big bummer. Just saying, in that constitution, for example, as it was put in the constitution, women was supposed to be given the same rights as men. They would be allowed to vote. They would be allowed to work, get education on the same conditions as men, and many other things too. Where are we? So we're back in the Soviet times. I mean, it's not like we really left. Sometimes it feels like I never really left the Soviet times, but nevertheless. So, um, since I don't want to overlap with Leonie, so we are going to have just a short visit to this room, and next time we're going to make up for everything I won't be able to cover today. So starting from then, Georgia became part of the Soviet Union, and then in 1930s, Stalin comes to power, and in 1932, his well, a friend, an associate, and his representative, his viceroy, so to speak, first deputy chairman, Lavrenti Beria, who settled not really far from where we are nowadays. He offered, well, it's like he came up with the idea to move Stalin's mother from Gori. We visited Gori together. I showed you the place where Stalin was born and lived for a long time. So Lavrenti Beria offered to bring mother of Stalin to Tbilisi, and it was his initiative to let her live in this entire palace. The entire palace, just one woman with a couple of maids and some chicken too. Well, we will get to that. And Stalin said yes. And Ekaterina Geladze, so this is the name of Stalin's mother, said yes too. But she said she would not be using the entire palace because she could. But she said she would only need 3 rooms, and she had only one condition. So her maid had to live with her, which makes sense. So the maids lived with her, and also her chicken. She had chicken. It's like she had a little house farm with chicken, and they lived in the room next door, the chicken, and then they would be out, for grazing in the middle of the day to the garden. I mean, chicken, Stalin, mother, all of this together. But let's move on. We need a couple more minutes, and then we are going to be done for tonight. And this room was her bedroom. There's no bed. We know that beds were never really preserved because they were seen purely utilitarian. And also the mirror, is the one that Stalin's mother used. Some of the well, it wasn't her typewriting machine, it wasn't her phone, but well, we see some photographs, and there is no well, we don't know if there was any decoration in this room. That's a big question. We don't know, but we know for sure that starting from 1932 till 1937, up until her death, Ketevan stayed in this house. And this is the photograph that was taken in this room. So you can see the bed. It's nothing special. She was a very modest woman. So she didn't live in those opulent rooms, but she could have, but she didn't. She just stayed in this room, which, according to what I understand, this room was used by one of the maids that served the viceroys. So that's why there most likely were no decorations, just as much as we have just seen or about to see next time. So she stayed in this room, and this photograph was taken in this particular room. You see Ketevan, you see Stalin, you see Lavrenti Beria, the bald guy, and also you see Kipshidze, who was the family doctor of Stalin. And there was written this kind of a postcard. It says, "Dear Mom, please live till 10,000 years old. Love you from your loving son, so." That's how Yosef was for the locals. So. And this is the photograph. There you go. So Stalin had been to this room several times. Yeah, this is Nikolai Kipshidze. Nikolai Kipshidze was a very loyal doctor to Stalin. He helped Stalin multiple times, and not only him. He was a specialist in hematology. He was a specialist in well, uh, he specialized in his research on blood supply or something like that. So Stalin and his mom were in good hands. However, next time we are going to talk more about since I have this opportunity to talk about it, because I don't have let's say, when I walk along the Solalaki beautiful streets and enjoy Art Nouveau buildings, I cannot really talk about, hey, would you like to know what was the relationship? What was the relationship between Stalin and his mom? Did they get along? Were they at odds? I mean, I can't talk about it, right? But in this particular tour, I can. So we are going to talk more about Stalin and his mother, and about her life, and about him, whether he was a good son or a, so-so kind of son. We'll talk about all that and more. I'll show you more old photographs. We will see some really impressive interiors and talk about the Viceroy, talk about the arrival of Nicholas II and also his father to Georgia. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm so happy that I can finally share this. The chat is back on. Let me know if you have any questions. And thank you everyone who joined me, and hi to those who joined us a little after we started. Hi, Roger, Zoom user, whoever you are. Vila, good to see you. Catherine's not sure if I said hi, so I'm saying it again just in case. I would like to remind you that in 1 hour from now, there is another premiere and the last tour of the weekend. I hope Dolly is here though, but I'm not sure if Dolly is here. Dolly, are you here? Oh, Sharon, hi. Shelly, Dolly, hi, dear. I'm so sorry. I don't know where the link disappeared. I think it all was on the newsletter, but I don't know. I'm so sorry. So it's been recorded, so I will share the recording soon. Hi, Marilyn and Marcy. Hello, hello. You will watch the beginning during the week. Yeah, sure, no problem, no problem. And well, the beginning was mainly of what you definitely already know since you have visited Georgia yourself and you walk down this avenue too. Well, but anyway, yes, kind of a nice recap, a little overview of the development of the city, and a little bit of the geopolitical situation back in the 19th century. the Minister of the Superior Link. It could have been on my side, honestly. I could have just missed something as well. But it's been reported, so we are all good. It's all covered. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I will see you in the Armenian Quarter in 1 hour from now. And don't forget, we're going to visit the several ceramic workshops, by the way. And the highlight would be definitely visit to Harut's workshop in the heart of the Armenian Quarter. And by the way, the Armenian Quarter is very small, and there are very few actually places that are accessible to average visitors. But we are not. We're not, you know. So we're going to see a little bit more. Well, it's going to be a short series of talks of the Armenian Quarter, but definitely more than one. So the next episode is already scheduled for the next weekend, same time as today. And a couple more tours are already there as well, like the Convent of Ascension of the Russian Orthodox Church, and also the second episode of the Viceroy Palace in Tbilisi. Thank you, Cindy, for finding time and strength to join me. It always means a lot to me whenever you join. And it always means a lot to see all these familiar names and some new names and some mysterious names. Like, I don't know who this Zoom user is, but I know you cannot change the name because I have disabled this function. Thank you again. Thank you so much. So finally, I can talk more about Stalin. It's not like I really want to talk about Stalin, but these type of things they're not that well studied. Yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. I will see you soon. And if you're joining Leonie, well, send her my love. Thanks for everything. I will see you soon. Bye bye.